Hey guys, what's happening? Today I wanted to talk to you all about a little thing called tracing. Tracing I think is a somewhat controversial subject in the art world, but I think that when used properly with mindfulness and foresight, it can be a useful thing. A lot of people, a lot of young artists, and probably even old artists, think that tracing is like an inherently bad practice, but I don't quite see it that way. And I want to take some time to come to defense of this tool. Like anything else, it's a tool. It's not inherently good. It's not inherently bad. It depends on how you use it. So if you're using a piece that is requiring tracing, or that you're choosing to use tracing for, where you source your traces from and what the purpose of the piece are both really important factors. If you're tracing someone else's artwork for practice, that's absolutely fine. For even a personal piece, totally okay. If you want to share that piece on social media or anything like that, it's extremely important that who you're sharing that with knows that it's a traced piece, or knows that it's a heavily referenced piece, and also knows what that original piece is. That's extremely important if you're tracing another person's piece of art. Right now you can see I'm using tracing pretty heavily in this piece here, which is a conversion of Luna, the 12-member K-pop girl group, into the style of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, one of my all-time favorite animes. I decided to use tracing for this piece because, well, there's 12 members and I didn't want it to take literally years to finish. So time constraints are absolutely a reason why you might turn to this technique. That being said, spoiler alert, it's still taking years to finish. I have not finished this piece yet. I'm only about a third of the way through. But anyway, enough about that. Time constraints are a valid reason why you might want to trace something off of photo reference just so you can get a pose down super quick. And if you're using something like a stock image or a stock pose, or something to that effect, something that is photographed and not necessarily another artist's drawing, another piece of visual art, that's a much, I think, in my opinion, more ethical way to trace. And it can get you some good practice with learning like proper proportions and really working on that muscle memory, that sort of unconscious education of learning by doing and learning by reproduction. Of course, you do have to be mindful and not use this as a crutch, because if you do it too much, you are robbing yourself of actually building up those fundamental skills and relying on tracing to just kind of carry all of that through. For the purposes of this piece, I thought the trade-off was worth it, and the time I would spend working on poses, proportions, and getting the clothing to look right was worth less than the actual focus of the piece, which was taking these young women and drawing them in a different artist's style. So I'm taking the original piece and transforming it, which I think is another really sort of much better way to use tracing to your advantage as a tool. If you take the original piece and you just reproduce it for purposes of practice, that's honestly fine. There's not really a problem there. But if you take the original piece and transform it, well, then it kind of becomes a different thing, So nobody is gonna be guessing whether this was traced or not when I post this. It was clearly based on the original photograph, and it's like very clearly intentionally done with just a stylistic change. But by doing this sort of transformative stylistic change, I'm also engaging in something that I really have been appreciating lately, which is the power of the mashup, which is, one of those techniques where you just take two unrelated concepts or theories or, styles or anything like that, and you mash them up together. As well as layering on top of the mashup, which I think is just like a really fun way to come up with creative ideas. I'm doing an example here of style duplication, where I'm taking a different artist's sort of signature style that they're best known for and trying to reproduce it as close to that artist would. And that's a really useful tool along with tracing, and kind of in the same vein in that you're doing something that isn't entirely of your own creative volition, but it's still very useful to get a sense of their process and get a sense of what challenges they might face in their own style and how they might overcome them by looking at their different examples of visual shorthand and things of that nature. You might get a better idea of where line weights might be placed, where shading could be, how lighting is tackled, by looking at these artists who are presumably people that you look up to. If you're doing a style copy, it's probably someone who you aspire to be at the level of, or who you look to for inspiration on the regular. So by combining tracing, mashing up two different styles and transforming the work, as well as adding another artist's sort of signature style on top of it, I'm using tracing here, sure, but I'm not purely doing that. And I think that's sort of an important distinguishment to make. I'm not just reproducing what's already on the page, which again, I want to be clear, for the purposes of practice is totally fine. And the other thing is, I'm not selling this. This isn't for anybody but myself. I stream it, I suppose, and my viewers come watch it and keep me company and, supply some conversation to the whole matter, but I'm not really making any money off of it. I'm not trying to pass it off as my own work either. It's very clearly a photograph of 12 real people. So, knowledge of the source, knowledge of intention, and just having the mindfulness to kind of balance all of these things are all ways that you can use tracing in a productive and ethical manner. Now, that being said, if you're doing something with tracing and you pass it off as your own work, you sell it without the permission of the original artist. If you get their permission, it could be okay. No harm, no foul there. But if you're basically stealing other people's works, that's absolutely an unethical thing to do. And there's no real two ways around that. Artists practice for years, decades, honing their craft and perfecting each piece that they make. Or not perfecting in my case. You can see a video about that as well. Anyway, these artists are pouring a whole lot of hard work into it. And in the age of social media and the age of internet, art theft is a massive problem, and unsourced art posting is also a massive problem, which posting a purely reproduced, traced work can certainly help exacerbate if the proper precautions and foresight are not taken when doing something like that. Again, mindfulness, that is the most important aspect here when you're doing something like tracing. So in the end, it's really not about whether or not you decide to trace a given piece. It's more about how you share that piece with the outside world. If the outside world never sees it, it honestly does not, it really doesn't matter. If it's just for you because you wanted to try it out, you wanted to get some practice in, go ham. You have my blessing and my permission to do so. But it's really in thinking about how it'll be seen by others and preempting that by giving full knowledge of source and attribution to the original artist is a way that you can still trace and share your work, because maybe it's something you're really proud of. I quite like how this one's going. I'm probably going to share that later on. It's important that you give that attribution to the original artist for their efforts and for their creativity that you could then use to make your own piece. So that's all I have for you guys today. If you liked this video, please let me know by giving it a like. And you know, why not tell me about, you know, an artist style that you think you'd really like to try and recreate, because I think that's a really interesting and fun exercise to do. And I'll be back with another video on Wednesday. So if you're not already subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can catch that next one. Peace.